Fallout from the 2020 presidential election is causing concerns over the security of this year's midterms.
More than 300 Republican federal and statewide candidates on the ballot have publicly raised baseless claims questioning the outcome of the last major federal election. As a result, there are growing concerns, threats of violence, and other attempts at interfering with the midterm results. And what might happen if these election deniers happen to lose? Let's bring in Robert Pape now for more on this. He's director of the University of Chicago's Project on Security and Threats. Robert, we're glad you're here. What type of threats are election officials looking out for today?
Well, today itself is probably going to be the calmest day. There'll be a lot of concern. Everybody will be on high alert. There may be some fighting at some polling stations, but the real concern is going to start after the voting stops and the counting starts tonight. And we've already seen this foreshadowed in the attack on Pelosi in San Francisco. So the election season, we often think, ends with the vote. The day the votes occur, the day all the mail-in ballots are in, and the real violent season, though, related to elections starts with the count. And that can happen very quickly, and it could happen at points over the next 2 or 3 months. So unfortunately, this is not something that we can just get through today and say, oh my gosh, we made it. No, that's what happened in 2020. A lot of folks did that, and then they didn't realize the real flashpoint was coming with January 6th.
Robert, how are officials preparing to combat any threats of violence at our nation's polling places if that does happen tonight, especially during counting, as you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So during the actual vote itself, and I just voted, and I'm sure many of your viewers have just voted, you may not see obvious signs of, say, police standing guard or so forth, because nobody wants to feel like they're voting in an armed camp or so forth. But you will see police just simply driving by very frequently, maybe a block away and so forth, but you have to look kind of closely. And then the election officials themselves, those you're sitting there, you show your ID or however you get your ballot, and they themselves are going to be primed to call for help at the smallest sign of any problem. So today is a day where people are on high alert, and that really helps with security, because there's nothing like millions of eyes and ears to alert, and that's what's happening today. The more dangerous time is going to start later tonight, and these flashpoints are hard to predict, but you can see a potential one in Pennsylvania, for example, where there's already a court fight brewing over tens of thousands of mail-in ballots. Well, that is the kind of thing that could fester and could grow very, very quickly, because we have millions of Americans who have violent sentiments, where they are willing to support violence rather than accept the outcome of elections they don't like. So we're not in a benign environment after the vote. We're in an environment where, unfortunately, there's already a large number of people in the country, a minority to be sure, but a determined minority, and this can very quickly focus a election dispute into a flashpoint. And those are the things that we'll be concerned about, and also law enforcement will be concerned about. And this is unfortunately going to go on for weeks, if not months.
Speaking with people in Michigan who say that in some areas they're going to try to count the votes with observers from both parties, but not where there's windows or street-side vantage points like there were in 2020, which caused some problems. Do you think election officials can or should calibrate how and when they count and certify to prevent the menacing that we saw 2 years ago?
Yeah, I think that's an idea, but I don't think that really worked 2 years ago. And that's not really what's at issue in the counting of the vote. It's more when we see court cases brought, and then the courts dismiss those fraud cases. What are the basis of that? That's what the January 6th committee did. They went through in detail these legal issues, which the media hates to cover because they're so boring most of the time, right? But those are the core issues that the January 6th committee delved into in depth And that's why we just had a better understanding of how little fraud there really was in, say, Arizona. Well, that would be the better approach. You see, trying to just do this from a window, people really don't know what they're supposed to be seeing from that window. The core issue is like a court case, where you actually see, here's the presentation of the claim of fraud, not just with a single sentence, but for 10, 15 minutes. And then here is the refutation of that, not with a single sentence, but for 10 or 15 minutes. Well, that would matter. We saw that mattering with January 6th committee, but it's really hard for the media to do because they're worried about losing the viewers. But that's the kind of thing all the media and their executives and the editors should really be pushing for, because that's how the media could really calm things down.
Robert Pape, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
Absolutely.